Nature, and Aengus Kennedy from Nature Northwest has joined us on the show to talk about two things, Aengus. One being butterflies, and the other is not quite so pleasant, wasps. So this is the time of year for wasps, isn't it?
It is indeed. Insects we love, and insects we're not quite so sure about.
Right,
yeah,
right.
this is certainly when we start noticing wasps, at least, is the way to put it.
Yeah. They're just more. They're more bother this time of the year. They're more. They're annoying, and I suppose the thing not to do is the instinctive thing, and that is swipe them away or get annoyed and start flapping about. It's not the best approach, is it?
No, it only puts them on high alert. And we think of wasps, we think of the bright yellow and black little characters with the thin little waist. Now all the wasp species have a thin little waist, and that's how you tell them apart. Their body parts seem to be barely joined together. But we've over 120 species of wasp in Ireland, and that's stinging wasps. Over 120 different types.
And is there one that proliferates? Is there one that's more common?
Yeah, there's the common wasp, and then there's another character called the German wasp. Looks very similar, slightly different markings on the face, but otherwise muchness. And they're both the bright yellow and black characters that people see at this time of year. And
are they that colour, that distinctive colour to warn us?
Yeah, absolutely, because they have anybody who's been stung by one knows that they've got a good little pack of good little punch to their poison, to their sting, and it's warning off the predators because an awful lot of things like to eat wasps, and a lot of birds are able to deal with that sting.
But are they not apex predators within their own field, if you excuse the expression?
Yeah, because they are. Well, you're spot on, because they're hunters, and that's one of the big things about them. They do a few important things for us. They pollinate a lot of crops, and they pollinate a lot of wildflowers, but also they hunt their pest control. So a little bit like spiders or a little bit like bats. They hunt a huge amount of bugs, and they feed those to their babies. So in that way, they're kind of apex, I suppose, in amongst the insect world. There's not many insects would hunt wasps. In fact, some you might often think spiders in that kind of invertebrate world are on top of their game, but there's a specific group of wasps that only hunt spiders. That's their role. That's what they've evolved to do in Ireland.
They do have a purpose in the whole ecosystem.
Very much so. If you don't like spiders, there's wasps out there hunting them down for you as we speak.
Right.
If you don't like greenfly on your tomatoes or your rose bushes or whatever, there's wasps hunting them as we speak. So they're very important from that point of view. But then, of course, there's other bigger creatures will hunt them,
And in their cycle now, where are they at the moment? Why are they so annoying, or why is there so many of them at this stage of the summer?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So it's now we're starting to notice them. They've been there since around about April, when the new queens emerged. The queens overwinter. It's phenomenal when you think of it, really. Those little queens are able to overwinter in maybe some old rotten wood, under a log pile, that kind of thing. And they've the ability to be frozen time and time again if it's a cold winter. But they still emerge once the conditions are right, once the temperature is right. And they emerge and they start to lay their eggs. They start to build a nest, lay their eggs. And it's the workers then that we start to see in big numbers, not the queens, but the little clones of the queens, these little female workers. And they're the ones that they go out and they pollinate the crops, they hunt the bugs, and they're feeding the next generation and feeding the next generation. And that one queen can produce a nest of up to 10,000 wasps. So they can produce a phenomenal amount over the summertime. But all summer, they've been there building in numbers, but they've been busy hunting bugs, and they've been busy going into flowers, getting their nectar from the flowers, because that's what the adults need, something sweet. So we haven't really noticed them at all.
And how long then are they at their peak? How long are they at their most bothersome now?
Yeah, well, so now's about the time when their numbers have peaked. And because the babies there's no more larvae, no more babies being produced. The babies produce a little kind of sweet liquid, and that sweet liquid is a reward for the adults. So the adults feed them bugs like green flies, and then they get the reward of sweet liquid. But now there's no more of that reward left because there's no more reproduction. So as a result, a lot of the adults, their role is kind of done. The nest is built, the babies have all been fed, but they're still hungry. They're still looking for something sweet. And then you open your bottle of Coke, or you spray on some sweet perfume, or even just wearing the nice bright colours. They think you're a beautiful flower, and they see those bright colours and they smell the sweet smell, and they come over looking for their nectar, their reward.
All right. They don't mean you harm, they're just confused.
Yeah, not in the slightest. And as you said at the very beginning, if you flap your hands around, that puts them in a panic and puts them into defensive mode. And it's the most difficult thing to do. But if you can, remain calm and allow them fly off, because they'll very quickly figure out that you're not. You don't have something sweet to reward them. And what you can do, if they're annoying you, if they're eating, or if you're trying to eat your sandwich or whatever.
Yeah, if you're in one place, put out something sweet.
Put out something sweet, and you'll often see people do it with jam jars and that kind of thing. Put out something sweet, and that'll attract them in, and they'll kind of congregate around that and leave you in peace.
Yeah, I've seen that done in even outdoor seated areas where they'll have a jam jar or a lid or something with something sweet on it, and that's where they'll all go to and leave mostly.
That's the idea, and they'll congregate around bins and around bottle banks and things like that. But it's all that sweet stuff is what they're looking for. But if you can put out something alternative, they leave you alone. And they've had a good year this year, like many insects, because it's been so warm.
I've seen some really nasty looking ones, really big ones and long ones. They're different species. Are they native species or are they invasive species?
Yeah, so there's that thing with so some wasps can be quite big, but if they have that really, really skinny waist, so you think of an ant and think of its little waist. So wasp is something similar to that. If it doesn't have that skinny waist, it's not a wasp. And there's very big characters around at the moment, things called wood wasps, but they're not wasps at all. They're a type of sawfly, and they lay their larvae, their eggs into wood, into soft wood. And their larvae can live in softwood for years. So they'll emerge a few years later as these huge insects, they're over an inch long, yellow and black, and they can look alarming. They have a long, sticky, outy, pointy thing at the back of their tail, which is actually for laying eggs. It's not a stinger at all. But when people see that, sometimes they think a giant wasp has emerged.
Yeah.
But they can't hurt you in any way.
Oh, okay. Well, that's reassuring because they do look rather scary.
Yeah. And sometimes the biggest things, like our dragonflies and whatnot, are completely harmless to us.
So try not to be too freaked out by them, and hopefully we'll continue to coexist.
Well, and we need all these things, and they're all a vital part of the ecosystem of the food chains, So.
Okay, from that to butterflies, plenty of butterflies around at the moment, and we're going to focus on two of them. Painted ladies, would that be the most popular butterfly?
They come and go. It depends on the year. The painted lady has an amazing goes on an amazing journey. They start off life in the Atlas Mountains in Morocco, so in Africa, on a different continent. And we think of butterflies as these fragile little characters that live for a couple of weeks. And they flit around, and it seems any gust of wind knocks them off course. But they're actually surprisingly good flyers. They're surprisingly strong.
So they've come all the way from Morocco up through Spain, up into Northern Europe, and some of them make their way.
And some of them make the way here. Yeah, they'll come in 2 or 3 stages. So they'll arrive maybe in Spain or maybe in France, and they lay their eggs, and then that next generation will go another step further north. Some of those will head back to Africa, but sometimes then a third generation makes it all the way up to Ireland. And often it's around about this time of year, or in the last few weeks, they start landing, because they've been spending a few months travelling north, following the sun, basically. Yeah. And they arrive up here hungry and looking for flowers, looking for wildflowers, and looking for something to lay their egg onto. And they can only lay their eggs onto thistles and a couple of other flowers, but thistles really is what they're after. So it's such a compelling argument to leave a few thistles in the corner of the field, in the corner of the garden, because these little characters that have made 2, maybe 3 generational shifts or changes and travelled all the way from a different continent just to come to your garden and pollinate some of your own crops or your own wildflowers. All it needs is a couple of thistles,
And is it them that nest in nettles? Is that the butterfly?
So there's a few other ones do that. There's red admirals are one of the other migratory species that do that. There's a few species actually that lay their eggs onto nettles, right. And nettles are very important for that. And we get this beautiful, and this year seems to be particularly good for red admirals. They're black with orangey red stripes and a bit of white on them as well.
Striking design. Yeah.
Really striking, and they're quite big. They're one of the biggest butterflies that we have, and I bet you most of the people listening today have seen them recently. They're all over the place at the moment. In your gardens, in the hedges and the brambles and all the rest of it. And they will lay their eggs onto nettles when they arrive earlier on in the year. And then they die off. And then that generation is starting to emerge now. Some of the ones that are here are still migrants that have been travelling up across Europe, much like the painted lady. And then some of them are the ones that their eggs were laid earlier on in the year. Again, leave a little patch of nettles, leave a little corner of wild things in your garden, and you'll have these rewards. And they're feeding at the moment. And the next few weeks, they'll head back down south, off to the Mediterranean, off to the south of Spain, the south of France.
But some might be natives and some might be migrants.
Yeah, completely. So, for instance, there's 4 in my garden right now. I have these lovely wallflowers that I got locally, and they just keep flowering and flowering. They have lovely purple flower. So your local garden centres will supply these things, which are brilliant for pollinators if you ask for pollinator-friendly plants. And the red admirals on a warm day like today, they're flitting around. They have this gorgeous flight where they kind of glide for a minute and then settle down. It seems very gentle, very easy kind of flight. Lovely thing to watch. And they're as fresh as can be. So I would suspect that they've just emerged from the nettles in my garden.
Right.
Whereas the other day up in Inishowen, I saw a red admiral, but it was faded, it was battered, there was lumps literally taken out of its wings where birds had been going at it. And it's a good chance it had come all the way up from possibly France, and made it up to the top of Inishowen looking for a food source.
Right. Just describe the difference in the two of them, because the red admiral is kind of a red-orange design all the way around the edge of its wings.
Yeah, so if you can imagine a black wing with reddy orange stripes painted straight down it, and then there's white spots on it as well. Whereas the painted lady is much more kind of dominantly orange with little black bits in it. Yeah, so it's orange and black. The painted lady, whereas the red admiral is black with those big, strong red stripes, like I suppose like the stripes on the Navy fellas' epaulets, telling you what where he was in the Navy.
The rank, yeah.
The rank. Yeah,
so the painted ladies is the design the same on the inside and the outside of the wing?
No, that's one of the things that's phenomenal with these. With so many different butterflies, when they close their wings, they all but disappear. So one of the ways to tell the difference between the butterflies and the moths is the moths, their wings tend to be down, tend to be flatter, whereas the butterflies, their wings tend to be upright. But when they close those upright wings, the underside is very dark. So on there's a certain amount of camouflage in the painted lady. There's an awful lot more in the red admiral. It turns completely dark, dark shades of brown and black, which crisscross. And when they settle down under a branch, they just disappear if you haven't spotted them, if you haven't seen where they've gone. It's amazing camouflage. And then suddenly they open up with that big bright flash of colour.
That's nature's way of disappearing them.
Disappearing, which they have to be able to do, because they have to be able to stay still for days and days in a row if the weather conditions aren't right. And they have to be able to go onto that little bit of a log, onto that bit of grass, and just hang on and hope they've enough energy built up while our rains pass by.
And they're amazingly delicate little creatures. And when you think of the extremes of weather that we have here, even during the summer, wind and rain, and yet they continue to survive.
And they continue to survive. So the red admirals won't be able to overwinter. But for when you speak of how delicate they are, they have this incredible long tongue that comes out. It's like a little tube. It curls up inside their mouth. All the butterflies have this. And it's worth watching them and watching them closely when they land in your flowers. And you'll see this long, long tongue. It's as long as their body. If you can imagine the tongue as long as your own torso, coming out as delicate little tube. And it's able to probe deep into the flower to get the nectar. And then it curls back up again. And it looks like it couldn't survive anything. But they're surprisingly robust. Whereas the peacock butterfly, it's able to overwinter in Ireland. And we have a few different, the small tortoiseshell and the peacock butterflies, both of those ones, and you'll see them on the wing at the moment. The peacock's those bright eyes, those lovely colourful eyes on its wings, on its kind of reddish wings. And they're able to survive, much like the wasp we mentioned earlier, survive multiple freezing events if you get a very cold winter in the shed, often in the attic in a space like that. And it doesn't bother them in the slightest. And then they re-emerge around about April time when the weather's right.
And we're one of the luckier parts of Ireland for painted ladies. There seems to be plenty of them here. Why did they choose Donegal? Why would they come all the way up here?
Yeah, well, it'll depend on the wind very much and depend on the weather patterns. So they've got the wind behind them and they'll just go and they'll go and they'll go. And one of the reasons I think we're lucky up here is because we still have lots of wild places and we still have people leaving little corners of the field, little corners of the garden. And in fact, if anything, people are starting to embrace that, certainly in urban settings more and more around Donegal. And that's what they need. So if they're passing over green field after green field with no flowers in it, well, then they've no sustenance. They'll keep going as long as their energy allows them.
Right.
And then they come up to Donegal and they see our wildflowers and they see our beautiful ditches and hedges and the rest of it. It's yet another reason for leaving the hedges alone as much as is practical or as much as is safe and possible. And the same with the roadside ditches. And this time of year, sometimes the roadside vegetation is starting to collapse. We need to keep ourselves safe. We need to keep our traffic and our bicycle, our cyclists and everybody safe. However, if it can be left alone, or at least if some of it can be left alone, if you're cutting the edges of the roads, there's no reason to cut right in tight. You can just cut a couple of feet in to make it safe, make the margin safe, and then at least you're still leaving space for these characters who are still arriving from their journey from Europe.
Okay. Yeah. And they're harmless. I mean, some people are a wee bit spooked by them, but they're totally harmless.
Oh, completely harmless. Yeah, can't bother you in the slightest. And if they do land on you, it's a wonderful thing, but don't be tempted to pick them up by the wings. And they've all these tiny, tiny little cells, little kind of rectangular cells that have an iridescence in them. And if you did touch them by the wings, you'd see some of that iridescence on your fingers. And of course, if you knock that off enough times, they won't be able to fly.
Brilliant, Aengus. Anything of note to mention? Any events or walks or talks? Or
there's a few things coming up now, right? Yeah, thank you. The next week is a busy week. It's Heritage Week all over Ireland.
Yes, and
so not just my own events, but there's a heap of different events on in every county, and you can go onto the Heritage Council site and you can look up Donegal.
HeritageWeek.ie. You have the address here.
HeritageWeek.ie, and then I'm doing some fun walks. We're exploring a secret island in Inishowen. Next Saturday, we're heading out to Glenties and looking with the Inland Fisheries Ireland, and we're looking at the Owenea River. We're going out to Garton to look at water quality with the local authority water programme on next Thursday, and then we're going to the Boat Strand on Saturday and Rathmullen on Sunday. So there's beach, very busy week. There's beach, there's river. And there's Secret Islands with the Inishowen Rivers Trust. That's this Saturday. So have a look on the website naturenorthwest.ie, and you'll see links to book these things in. They're all free, but for most of them you do need booking. And there's a couple of little things just to note about weather and footwear and that kind of thing.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Aengus.
Yeah, super. Thanks, John.
Around the Northwest with Virgin Media. Winner